It was a typical day in my Alaskan research lab when the unexpected happened. I was engrossed in my work, examining data on climate change's impact on local wildlife, when the door swung open. Startled, I looked up to find myself face to face with a team of special forces, their uniforms marked with the unmistakable insignia of the Navy SEALs. I couldn't help but crack a skeptical smile. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" I asked, thinking it was a joke or some strange government experiment. The leader of the team, a weathered and stoic figure, met my gaze dead on. "Dr. Parker, have you ever heard of a creature known as the Yeti or Bigfoot?" I burst into laughter, thinking they were playing a prank on me. "Bigfoot? Seriously? Are you guys here to investigate an urban legend?" But their expressions remained unyielding, serious. "We're not here to joke around, Dr. Parker. The government sent us here to find a creature, something similar to a Yeti, that's been spotted roaming the Alaskan wilderness. We need your expertise." I shrugged, not taking it seriously. I've been studying Alaskan wildlife for years, and I've never seen any evidence of such a creature. It's just folklore, myths, and exaggerations. The team didn't argue further. They nodded, leaving my lab to embark on their quest. My curiosity got the best of me, and I couldn't resist trailing them from a distance as they ventured into the harsh Alaskan wilderness. It was during one frigid evening, as I watched them from behind the cover of snow-laden pines, that I witnessed something inexplicable. The forest grew eerily silent, and a shiver ran down my spine. The seals moved with a grace that defied their bulk, and then there it was, emerging from the shadows. The creature was immense, towering at least 8 feet tall. Its fur was a mottled blend of white and gray, matted and thick, clearly built to withstand the brutal Alaskan winters. Its eyes were hauntingly human, filled with a mix of curiosity and fear as it confronted the intruders in its territory. The beast's face was a blend of human and ape-like features, a fusion of the known and the unknown. Muscles rippled beneath its fur as it let out a guttural roar, echoing through the forest. This was no ordinary animal. It was something inexplicable, something beyond science and understanding. The Yeti, the Bigfoot, or whatever you wanted to call it, was very real. As the special forces engaged in a tense standoff with the creature, I couldn't help but marvel at the unexplainable phenomenon that had unfolded before my eyes. Yet my awe was short-lived as I began to feel that some of the special forces had noticed my presence, my intrusion. With a heart pounding like a drum, I retreated into the safety of my lab, locked the door, and watched from the window as the confrontation outside intensified. The creature ultimately retreated into the dense wilderness, but the SEALs were determined to continue their hunt. I can't explain the events of that day, but I swear by the truth of what I saw. There, in the depths of the Alaskan wilderness, a cryptid, a being that defied scientific understanding, had become a reality. Whether it was a Yeti, a Bigfoot, or something else entirely, it was an experience that forever changed my perspective on the mysteries of the natural world and the secrets it still holds. I'm part of the United States Army Special Forces. The Green Berets have been for several years now. In my tenure, I've deployed multiple times to Afghanistan, Iraq, a few months in Syria, several African countries. I've been to all 4 corners of the globe, and I've seen my fair share of the good and the bad and the ugly that comes with being part of SOCOM. I've got plenty of stories, some more interesting than others, but almost all of them are heavily classified behind red tape that will never be declassified until I'm dead and gone. However, there was an incident a few nights ago that stuck out from all the others. Mostly because one, and like all of our other operations that took us to a combat zone across the distant hemisphere, this one happened right at home in our own backyard. The enemies weren't a foreign proxy, a group of insurgents. It wasn't even human. Stuff from that night is still weird, and it's not like Command is gonna give us any answers. It's the reason I'm bypassing everything I've been told, disregarding and putting my ass on the line, even if I use false information and withhold names. Plenty of innocent people have died, as you'll find out, and Upper Command would sooner bury it than acknowledge their deaths and give their families closure. I don't have all the answers of what happened in that western Tennessee National Park, but I do have enough to let people know the truth, semi-truth, anyways. For safety and privacy purposes, like I stated previous, I'm withholding a lot of personal information such as names, exact locations, and unit information, referring to smaller shit that I don't think even the scary three-letter groups could really trace. Even if they cared, I hope they don't. Like I said, I'm part of a SOCOM Green Beret team. You all know who the Green Berets are. You should. My team is nicknamed Raider, a general theme in our company naming things after warrior culture-esque terms. Raider, Artemis, Barbarian, Centurion, etc. It's a 10-man element, the team lead, a way too salty Georgian captain with a warrant officer, a medic, a comm sergeant, and 6 weapons sergeants. Our captain decided this way was best. Considering we're all in one piece after our last mission, he was right. Our weekend was calm and boring as we got rotated on QRF Quick Reaction Force for the month. QRF means that if someone, somewhere needs the green-eyed boogeyman of the Western world, we were ready to get up and be there at a moment's notice. It just so happened right when some of us were getting ready to head to the bar and have our 2 singular authorized beers of QRF month, we were called. When we raced back to our COP and got our shit ready, the captain came with some surprising information. We'd be able to probably make it back for those beers because we were heading to West Tennessee, of all places. We didn't know what the status was yet. Command didn't give us any information. What the UPF IOR was, what weapons they had, what the layout of the area was. Nothing. But, being QRF team, Raider still kitted up, and we were at the HLZ in less than 20. While we waited for our transport, the captain finally got some information. Apparently a facility in the middle of uninhabited, restricted woods of a national park had activated a distress signal. The woods it was situated in was a large national park in, like I said, western Tennessee, with a long history of disappearances on. It's now frequently closed and blocked off trails and campsites. This raised a few questions. What was this facility? Why was it in a national park? What happened to need to roll out the angriest Green Beret team this side of the East Coast to act as its backup? Why were we going there when, in an hour, someone in Libya or someone across Eurasia might need us to back them up? The captain acknowledged all of these questions, but assured us that that's all he knew. He's been with our team for years now, several deployments to the box and back, and he's always been straight with us. It's how we knew he was lying. Our transport finally arrived. 160th SOAR Night Stalkers, an aviation unit that's been around for nearly 40 years, having dragged every single kind of SOK unit to every single part of the world. We expected the Black Hawk they brought, but the armed escort of 2 birds that came with them was a surprise. We were in domestic America. We were going to Tennessee. Why were they here? Even with the Night Stalkers flying at top speeds across several states, it still took us a couple of hours to reach our landing point. The inside of that bird going full throttle was deafening, even with the electronic headsets we were sporting. It was ear-splitting. And yet, while sitting next to the captain, I could tell he was speaking to someone on a different freak. This was off because normally he'd go to the comm sergeant and have to use the radio, but he had a side channel filled in his radio, talking to someone, writing down incoming information. I was able to peek over and saw some of the things he was writing. Moscow. Close quarters op 4. No blue 4 on X. The birds touched down in the middle of an empty parking lot, outside of the local ranger station. We filed out into the open area. The birds took off. The captain chimed in on our team net. Raider Romero, this is Raider Lead. Get on the net and have them hold orbit in case we need close air. Break. He then broke transmission and talked to us. All raiders hold outside and take up security. I'm gonna get the Ragnar. Prepare for a hasty ass RMP brief. I just got more information. We all took positions behind some of the parked vehicles the Rangers would use. Just to clear things up, our team was outfitted with GPNVG, also known as quad nods, 4-barreled night vision optics that provide an almost daytime, light view of our surroundings. Couple that with our PIQs mounted on our rifles, allowing us to see and shoot anything at night, as the military says. We own the night. The tree line in front of us was lit up like a G. Damn operator rave party as the captain walked back, nods down as the ranger currently on shift followed him. He keyed into our net, and we could hear him through our headsets. All raiders, this is Led. New information states that the facility has suffered a mass cal situation. Break. Mass cal means mass casualties. Enemy OPFOR, unidentified, however outgoing net during distress call indicates that OPFOR is extremely dangerous and engages at close range. Break. There is no bloofer on site. I repeat, Maine has stated there is no bloofer on site, and we are to drop in any all packs we see. A few seconds passed as the captain looked back to the park ranger. Any additional comments, Ranger Clements? The man was maybe in his mid-40s, balding. He scratched the back of his neck, clearing his throat before speaking. I heard a lot of gunfire coming from down there. And don't split up. Whatever you do in these woods, don't split up. Our medic laughed. Well, that's just comforting. The captain nodded to the man as he headed back in. Everyone watch your 6s, 12s, and 5s. Let's go. We picked up and moved out. Everyone had their kind of final moments. Type of readiness drill they did before they stepped onto the path into the woods. Same shit we did before stepping off out of the fobs and compounds back east. I let out one final breath of hot air in the cold. Our medic slapped the side of his helmet, hyping himself up. The captain pulled out and kissed a small crucifix necklace from underneath his combat shirt. We headed down the pathway, following the captain in a staggered column. Our IR lasers scanned the trees, rocks, and foliage around us, looking desperately for any hostiles that lurked in the darkness. Though to our paranoid readiness nothing appeared, but something was definitely following us. When we move through forest environments, you listen to the animals around you, the crickets, the birds, the movement of animals, and what direction they're heading, how fast. Moving down that path, we couldn't hear a G. Damn thing. It's common when you're a group of heavily armed green men moving through a forest at night that some of the squirrels and birds will run the hell away, but not the crickets or the bird songs in the distance. There's a certain level of ambiance that animals will maintain even if they detect humans around. There was none of that. Nothing. Not a cricket, a bird, a cicada. Nothing. Silent professionals. It's in our name. So when I could hear the mother F 10 meters ahead of me breathing as we moved through that dead forest, it told me that something else was here in these woods with us. A predator, and that the forest was more afraid of it than us. After a long stretch of marching down the trail, the captain held a hand up, signaling a halt. As it got down to my part of the column, the middle section, he called over a radio. This is Lead. On me. Time now. We quickly rushed up to what we saw was a metal chain-link fence. 4 of our weapons sergeants and the medic took up security covering the wood line behind us as I and the other remaining one went up to the gate with the captain. The park's trail carried on for a few more meters before stopping dead into some trees. The dirt path broke off and formed a gravel one that led into a sectioned-off area behind a chain-link fence and gate. A no trespassers sign hung high, and just beyond the gate we could see a small guard shack. The captain tried to signal whoever might be in there by switching on the surefire tack light on his rifle, shining it and lasso, waving it all over the booth. However, upon stopping and centering on a doorway, we saw a large amount of blood splashed on the back wall and pooled over the floor, an arm laying halfway out the door frame. The captain looked to the other weapons sergeant with us. "Get your kit," he nodded, slinging his rifle as he dropped his assault pack, digging out a small pair of bolt cutters. Each of our weapons sergeants carried a different loadout, depending on what we needed. One could be a gunner, another's a grenadier. Can't name him, but Breachman, as I guess I'll call him, always carried a breech kit, just in case. He walked over to the lock, but just as he got the blades of the cutter around the lock, we heard it. It sounded like it came from everywhere and yet far away at the same time. Maybe it was the echo of the forest, or maybe something attributed to its abilities. It sounded like a woman yelling in pain and agony, and yet the voice was half gargled, like it was morphed with that of a dying animal, as it had an underlying low-tone pitch beneath it. It got under the skin of everyone. Those pulling security immediately jumped their shit, scanning left, right, up and down. Hell, even the medic, big stocky dude, grew up in Brooklyn, played football before he joined, meaning he is yoked as all hell when he got to our unit. The guy who once stuck his fingers into a man's neck to plug his blood looked around nervously. The hell was that? Our weapons sergeant with the M46 shook his head as he scanned the far-off terrain, muttering in a low voice. Some horror movie bullshit right now. I remember holding my rifle's grip tight. Everyone was equally unnerved. Everyone except the captain. He just told us to press on. F6, tighten your jockstrap, let's go. He snapped the lock off. Immediately, the captain and I moved in and cleared the small booth as 2 more weapons sergeants and our medic took up covering down the gravel road. It was a guard, no name tape or company logo, decked out in a black plate carrier, the plate carrier of which had been torn into as a large hole covered the entire area of his solar plexus, which was now fragmented and broken inside of his mulched upper body. No bullet entry or exit wounds, just a large stab wound that looks like he got ran through by a lamppost. My breath still got caught in my throat as I grunted to clear it. The captain stepped out of the small booth, spitting hard into the grass, shaking his head. The medic prodded him. "What was it like?" He grunted, walking to the front of our formation. "Doesn't matter, Doc." We formed up and moved down the gravel road in a wedge column. The captain and 3 weapons sergeants in the front wedge, with the medic, me, and the other 2 W's in the back one, the comm sergeant in the middle. We entered the facility lot. Immediately the comm sergeant linked up with the captain, and I could hear him alerting Maine. "This is Raider. Lead. We've reached the building, though it makes me wonder if he used the comm sergeant's radio to reach our HQ. Who was he talking to on that other channel?" The lot was clear, and we got a good look at the facility. It was a gray concrete rectangle, maybe the size of a small gas station. Floodlights mounted on the bottom illuminated the gravel lot up to the dense shadowy wood line that lay just beyond the chain-link fence. The wood line that was still quiet. The Moscow carnage we were told about was present outside of the building. Several guards, all in various states of mutilation similar to the gate guard, were strewn about the gravel lot. However, unlike the gate guard, strangely, they were in heavier body armor with rifles capable of going automatic and spent brass everywhere. Me and some of the other guys got online and cleared out the back. Exasperated breaths and muttering came from all of us. The captain chimed in. "Raiders on me. Time now." We hauled ass back to him as we stacked up at the door. Flowing in, we were greeted to a lobby, torn up, furniture thrown everywhere. Impact marks from rounds hitting the concrete lined the walls and ceiling. One dead guard slumped against a red-stained part of the wall, the other in a crumpled heap. A woman at the desk, not a guard, just a staff member, sat back in her chair, her entire torso area torn apart. As we passed by her and headed through the double doors behind her, her empty dead eyes met mine. The comm sergeant eyed her as we all moved for the door. "Sir, she was unarmed, I can see that. Keep chatter to a minimum." We cleared through the double doors to be greeted by a porcelain hallway leading into a set of stairs heading to a sub-level. The entire surface, ceiling, walls, floor, was lined with ceramic white tiles. Ceramic white tiles that were like the rest of the scene so far, stained with the blood, guts, and even brain matter of the unlucky guards laid out all the way down the stairs. I counted 8. 17 so far. The flickering light could be seen through the wire glass windows of the double doors at the bottom. The captain ordered us to flow in through both sides. We did. Pushing in, we could see we entered into a T-style hallway. It gets a bit complicated here. Either end of the T ended while the middle one shot forward far down into a hall leading to 2 reinforced blast doors at the very end. 2 immediate labs on either side were reinforced with more wire glass, and despite several cracks, impact marks, bullet holes, and even holes made in the glass, they held. "This shit can't be ballistic glass," our comm sergeant muttered. "Why didn't they just take cover in here?" the medic said. The captain sighed. "Seems to be pointing to a surprise attack from the inside." "Emphasis on surprise, jackass." The medic fired back. "Well, sure, but it's just a door." While the hallways outside were a mess of blood, gore, guards thrown around as they were ripped apart, creating a mess of bodies, weapons, and more spent brass. The lab techs had their white coats stained with their own blood. My blood, and I think everyone else's, started to run cold as the pieces came together. Whatever killed them did so indiscriminately. We formed a rolling tedding into down the hall. I was on the right, with the gunner taking center, and another guy on left. The captain pushed forward, leading us from behind. The windowed labs ended halfway, with 2 solid white doors near the double doors at the end on either side, leading to closed-off labs. The captain had his pull guard on both of the side doors as the gunner aimed back down the hallway. Everyone else took up security wherever it was needed. The captain eyed the door, feeling the cracks and lines of the blast doors, looking for gaps that didn't exist. Blood had slowly leaked out of the bottom, causing him to pick up his boot and eye it, and yet no openings existed. An electronic pad was positioned on the right side of the doors. The captain eyed it. It was a hand scanner. I didn't even think those actually existed. He jumped on that private freak I keep mentioning. "I'm at the doors." "Yeah, at the far end there's a hand scanner." He waited a few seconds of deafening silence. He made an internal chuckle as he walked over to the dead body of a guard, kicking its arm. "Got one right here. I'm sorry." Repeat last. "Alive." He rubbed his face, cursing under his breath. "If," he shook his head, turning on the white light on his rifle and scanning the corpses. "This place is a G-damn slaughterhouse. How am I gone?" A crash emanated from the white lab door to the right of the blast doors, the one I was covering. Everyone paused for a second, as a second weapons sergeant aimed his laser at it. The captain turned, aiming his laser at the door as he approached. "Might have one, or might have OPFOR. Actual. Wait 1, over." The captain formed up as first man in the stack, an unusual practice, but everyone else fell behind. I was the second man. 2 more made third and fourth. A weapons sergeant felt the edges of the door, then tried the handle. Locked. Him trying the handle must have alerted whatever was inside, because a voice bellowed out, I'm in here. Please, I'll let you in. Just don't shoot." The doorman looked to the captain, who nodded. "Might have blue for inside. Stay sharp. Wait on me to fire." There wasn't supposed to be any blue for on site. The door's electronic lock opened. The doorman grabbed the handle and pulled it open as the four of us entered the room. We pushed through. The captain hooked left. I pushed forward. The other two followed one of us, respectively, our lasers centered on the room, and a pair of hands emerging from behind a lab table. "T, please!" the voice weakly shouted. The captain stormed over. "Hands! Now, I'll shoot you, I swear to God." "If you don't put your G-damn hands up." As the person stood up, we saw the hands were connected to a scientist, possibly late 30s, stringy hair, with circular glasses. Glasses that flew off when the captain closed the distance, shoving him against a metal cabinet, spittle flying from the bearded mouth beneath the NGs as he barked at him. "Gad, where is it? Show it!" The captain began roughly searching the lab tech as he pulled out his ID. He grabbed it, shoving him to the weapons sergeant on his side of the room. The lab tech was kicked down to his knee. The captain jumped back on that freak. "I'm back. Possible bluffer, prepare for. ED code." He read it off in phonetics before he got the response. He looked to the weapons sergeant guarding the lab tech. "Get his ass up." Please. I don't know what's going on. I was just running some chemical tests. We've got to get out of here before." The captain got in the man's face. "Shut up." He did. "You know what you've been doing. I know what your sons of bitches been doing out here. Open them doors right now." The man was shocked as the captain continued. "Open the G-damn doors?" With a point from the captain, the weapons sergeant shoved the man forward into the door frame. The man crumbled a little bit as the captain laughed. "Take your sweet time, Doctor. Let's go." I picked him up by his shirt collar and dragged him over to the blast doors. The captain pushed him out of my grip, shoving him face first into the doors. "Hand on the scanner, now." As the captain grabbed the man by his wrist, the lab tech struggled to get free. "Please, I don't have that access. I hurt my hand trying to hide. Let me go." The medic winced at the sight a bit, uncharacteristically of a green beret, especially for a jaded-as-all-hell medic. He spoke up. "Cap, come on." The captain just turned, staring daggers into the man as he wrestled for the man's wrist. "Just wait till y'all see. I'm telling ya." As the man struggled against the captain, the weapons sergeant came up from behind, shoving the man into the blast door, allowing the captain to easily place it on the scanner. The scanner lit up in a bright blue as several lines traced and looked over his handprint. It then flashes green as the electronic locks of the blast doors begin to open up. The captain dropped the man. "Well, goodness gracious. What do you know?" The doors slowly pulled open. The room was dark. Red flashing emergency lights flashed all around as the sound of broken glass scraped against the door. A stream of murky blue liquid, mixed in with the blood of several guards' bodies that were revealed at the doorway, leaked out into the hall. The captain grabbed the lab tech by the collar, dragging him to his feet. "Yeah, I know these men, Doctor. Friends?" The captain shoved him through the doorway, the lab tech slipping on the fluids and glass, cutting his right hand with a wince. We flowed in and... Jesus. I said this at the start. I've been all over. I've seen mass graves that terrorist cells have used in far-off countries filled with entire villages worth of people. I've seen killed dens inside tunnel systems. This surpassed all of that. Every horror, every war crime, multiple times over. A series of gigantic glass tubes lined the walls made out of monitors, hard drives, and computer systems. The path of carnage led through the pile of guards at the doorway. That makes 24 armed personnel that were taken out by something. What really bothered me was what was in those murky blue and green glass tubes, as big as a refrigerator, connected to a port on the bottom and top, tubes and wires inside connecting to... The captain shoved the lab tech into a glass tube. The pop of the man's nose echoed off the empty area as he grabbed his nose. "Well, Doc, which one was it?" "Which goddamn tube?" "Tube? What was he talking about? How did he know? Who was on the freak?" The lab tech spit out blood leaking into his mouth as the captain, standing at 6'5", a giant even among his team full of brawny soft operators, picked him up by the collar of his blue undershirt. "I don't..." Two weapons sergeants ducked out of the way as the captain got in his face, shoving him against the left side wall, causing the monitors and computer systems to beep and light up. "Oh, you don't know, and yet your little hand opens the room you didn't have access to," he roared, abandoning all silence and discretion now as the man began to sputter and sob. "Please, please, please, The captain gritted his teeth. He quickly flipped up his nods and stared daggers into the man's soul. "How many people you snatched off that trail? How many? What kinds of butchering you do to those kids before you stuck 'em in there? Which one escaped?" "Kids. Butchering." Something in my mind stopped, and I switched on my rifle's tack light. A heavy pit in my stomach formed as I flashed it on the tubes. There were people in those tubes. They were people, wire and tubes now poked into sea, through a murky flash, as the bodies of the kidnapped floated, mutated, dissected, and changed. One person's skin ran reptilian-like up their left arm before merging with a strange gaping hole in their chest, their skull protruding out of the skin in their head. My breathing stuttered a bit as I backed up a few steps, glass crunching under my boots. Curses muttered by the others in the room as we all began to look. Another one's mouth was sealed at the front. Two more jagged, messed-up sets of teeth poked out either side. Their eyes were sealed, skin covering defined sockets on their head. The medic flashed his on one where their spine stuck out through their back. The vertebrae was larger than a normal person's, the bone sticking out inches longer in some areas. "Jesus, man, this shit's..." He gagged a bit, coughing as he looked away. I had to pry my eyes. My mind was frying just looking at. "They better be dead. Oh, I swear to the Lord himself, if they ain't," the captain said sternly as the man sobbed and nodded. "Yes," the captain raised an eyebrow. You sure?" "Yes, they died during surgery." "If you're lying to me, I swear to Christ, I will make you euthanize every single one." The captain shoved the lab tech forward. Into the center of the aisle, I looked down, shaking my head as the images of those things burned into the film of my brain. "Where's she gone, Doctor?" the captain said sternly, squaring up to the man who sobbed as he shrugged. Where is it?" the man continued to cry. "It escaped. It killed everyone. It cut through the guards. It cut through everyone. All of my friends." This caused the captain to nearly bust a blood vessel from the look he gave him, balling up his fist and driving the armored knuckle of his Oakley glove into the gut of the lab tech. This caused the smaller, weaker lab tech to buckle over, dropping to his hand and knees, now favoring an injured hand and a probably burst spleen. "Your friends? Your friends? You mean the friends that kidnapped a 22-year-old girl and a 14-year-old son and turned them into monsters? What about them?" This earned only more sobs from the lab tech as the captain turned, hands on his hips, and scoffed. He looked at the medic, who only stared back through his nods. The captain turned to look at him. "You got to the count of 10, and if you don't give me a single whereabouts of this thing, I will start grabbing tools and cutting your little weasel ass up like you did to these kids." The captain loomed over the man, grabbing him by his hair. "Yes, sir. Please," the lab tech pleaded. 1, 2, 3. The captain counted. Some looked away, others shook their heads. Not out of shame of our leader. There wasn't a man in the room who wouldn't do what he did right now after. Seeing, Them. It's in the woods. You heard it. It did its freaky yell just like 10 minutes ago. The captain laughed, letting go of the man's hair as he whipped his head forward. Yeah, hear that. It's in the woods. He pulled out his M17, his 9mm sidearm, pulling the slide back a bit to make sure it was chambered 4. 5.6. The man stood up, and at this point, I kicked out his extended leg, dropping him back to his knees. The man looked at me, then at the captain. You can't do this. This is illegal. Before the captain could finish his could, we heard it. It echoed all the way down the facility halls, reverberating off the glass tubes in the room. That half-feminine, half-monstrous cry, except this time it didn't come from the far-off mountains or trees. It came from up the stairs. Then the lights went out. I don't know if it was prior damage to the facility, the electric works, or something else, but they zapped out. The lights in the halls, the lights on the stairs, the lights in the room, the electronics, the lights in the tanks, all of it. It cried out again, and this time, I think I heard it say, "Help me." Anyone who had their nods up flicked them down as all of us trained our lasers down the dark hall beyond the doors. The slight shakiness of all the green lasers told the same stories. All of the death, all of the shit in the tanks. It had everyone spooked. The captain came up alongside me and the medic. He looked back to the lab tech. You run. You die. The man swallowed and smothered his misery. I know. The captain corrected him in a low tone. No, you really don't. The creature cried out again. Help. Me? The sounds of something hard impacting the tile floors sounded out as it approached us through the dark abyss. More footsteps. Then another cry. Help! Me! The gunner lets out a shaky breath as he cracks his neck. More footsteps. Then another cry. Help! Me! It's maybe 5 meters from the door now. Lord Almighty, the captain muttered. I couldn't see much in that darkness then, but I saw what everyone else saw. I saw enough. Its body was easily 6 feet tall. 2 gigantic, bony, mantis-like legs that were dark from blood stepped into the doorway. Its head was smooth, its large teeth shining in the darkness, and its eyes glowed like an animal. Its eyes glowed. It could see us. We all froze. We had rifles trained on it, a machine gun trained on it, a room full of green berets, the best of the best, and everyone froze. The captain was the first to fire, slamming his trigger as he shot 223 death into that crime against existence. The gunner opened up as well, and then the medic, 2 more weapons sergeants, also shot it. It yelled at us, cried out like an agonized woman, pleading for help. Then it lunged. Running and slamming through a test tube, glass flew everywhere, causing several of us to shield our faces as the water flooded the floor, and the deformed body that was inside flopped down near our feet. A horrendous, rotted smell filled the air. Jesus! The medic sputtered out, gagging a bit as he kicked it away. The creature now screamed as a rifleman that had jumped near backed up. It leaped on top of him, shoving that bony mandible into his left shoulder, pinning him to the ground as he screamed, thrashing his elbow into the thing as he kicked its stomach. But it didn't attack him. It just eyed the scientist. He attempted to run for his life, but the thing jumped on top of him, pinning him face first into the murky, wet floor. That's when I noticed the 6 smaller human, like arms on its torso. Its main mandible pinned him to the ground. The arms, some normal, some with bony spikes for fingers, others just lined with sharp teeth, began to rip into the man's back. The lab tech screamed. His lab coat was torn open as it began to dig down into his back. Some still fired shots, but it didn't even react. It didn't even move. Just continued to tear into that vial. But poor son of a bitch. The captain's voice lit up the comms as he and the medic rushed to pick the man up. and heave him on the captain's shoulders. "We can't engage him here. Outside now." He was right. It thrived on close quarters. It ran guys through before they could pick it apart. We all ran, nerves shot, weapons hot from firing into a thing that didn't react. The power off so we couldn't close those blast doors. All we could do was run. I nearly slipped on the glass as we booked it out of there, firing some desperate pot shots into the lab with a gunner. The lab tech's screams echoed throughout the hallway as we booked it up the stairs. It was gonna be done with him soon. The gunner and I covered the captain as we broke out into the open air, the smell of rotten death replaced by the open piney air of the forest. Several men broke out road flares, tossing them everywhere, giving us much-needed light in the form of greens, blues, reds, and purples. The captain dropped the man behind a beaten-up and wrecked sedan. As the medic began to patch him up, the gunner deployed his bipod and aimed at the doors of the facility from the car's hood. The captain positioned different men to where they all could fire on the door, far enough away from the thing's grasp. "Romero, get on that net and call in that air." The comm sergeant began to go to work behind the sedan. I took aim behind a large SUV with several others. We all aimed at the door. The screaming had stopped. The silence was broken by its bony mandibles as it rushed out into the open air. And with all the flares and chem lights and even the captain's tack light, we finally got a good look. Its skin was a mix between pink from its exposed muscles to a see-through clear layer covering other parts. Bony calcium-like armor had formed over a lot of its body, and its back to legs formed smaller mandible-like features at the back. In its head, an exposed skull, all to human eyes peering out at is in rage as its larger unhinged jaw opened, and it roared out its deafening cry at us. The gunner was the first to open up. The blast of 5.56 tore through the armor on its mandible legs and torso. The thing recoiled at first and then hissed as it charged forward. The captain ran from his place in front of the sedan side. The thing stuck its two large mandibles into the roof, badly denting it. The medic quickly covered the wounded weapons sergeant, shielding him as the thing peered down at the two. The captain quickly got its attention, aiming fire at the back of its head. It roared with a vengeance as it charged at the captain. He fell back to the sedan, running out of our line of fire as the thing barreled towards us. The thing stuck a mandible inside the hood, impaling it, and then another, just to my left. I circled around and behind it as I fired. It cried out, blood now pouring from its wounds as its calcium plating was cracking and falling off in masse. The thing turned to me, and as I flicked my moor to auto and laid into it, it just barreled at me, shoving me to the ground. Its smaller, demonic hands reached for me as I kicked them away. Its jaws snapped as I held my rifle in the way, shielding my face as it gnawed on the metal. The gunner then blasted a chunk of its exposed skull away, staggering it as it turned. The captain whipped his stock into the thing's head, then backpedaled as he fired off another burst of rounds. The thing turned at him, roaring viciously as the captain dropped his empty mag. He slapped in a fresh one as the thing lunged at him, both mandibles raised. The glass exploded out of the SUV's windows as the captain dropped levels, firing into its stomach as he circled out back into the open. The creature roared as it went to move for him again, but it couldn't. Its large mandibles were stuck all the way inside of the vehicle. The captain let his rifle hang slung on his front as he reached for something on his kit, an M67 fragmentation grenade. "Get back!" Everyone who was in the open ducked for cover. The gunner and several weapons sergeants retreated behind a series of concrete jersey barriers. I ran and slid behind the sedan, helping the medic to shield our wounded battle buddy. I heard the distinct sound of the spoon flying and the whistling of the grenade. The captain vaulted himself over the car hood with the comm sergeant covering his radio operator's head as they both went prone. The explosion was thunderous. The shockwave of the grenade shook everyone, and even rattled me a bit from being so close. Shrapnel and fragments flew everywhere, impacting the concrete barriers, the building. Any windows on the sedan that already weren't broken were shattered. A few seconds passed as we all hesitantly started to life our heads, then dropped them as the SUV's gas tank seemingly erupted and detonated, engulfing the wreck in a fireball to large. I felt like the flames were touching my face. The captain popped up, aiming on top of the hood of the car. Then I and several others joined him, peeking from behind our points of cover as we looked to see if that had done it. The SUV was a burning skeleton. An inferno from all of the ignited gasoline covered the frame, the ground around it, and the beast, as it definitely pulled its last remaining mandible, its front left one, the only appendage it had left, and stumbled out from the flames. Its skin popped, its muscles boiled, and with all of the see-through skin and bone plating torn and burnt off, it gazed around. Its eyes ruptured and melted. Help me. The gravel crunched as its charred and still burning body slumped forward. The captain emerged from behind the Vic as only a few of us dared to approach the thing. He lifted his nods, this time pulling his M17 back up and aiming it at the thing's head. 3 shots into the thing's head, the damaged and charred skull caving in. A circle of light illuminated us as the rotary blades of the Black Hawk sounded out overhead. I shielded my face and lifted my nods to avoid the spotlight blinding me. Op 4. Actual down. Building secure. The ensuing hour was one that was just shrouded in. I don't know. Mystery, I guess. The captain went against prior missions of telling us to go prone and pull security, putting the gunner at the sedan by the gate and telling the rest of us to watch the wood line. When the van showed up, that's when he told us to chill out. They weren't really vans. They were more like armored trucks. Now, for the sake of being classified and remaining anonymous, I can't divulge a lot about them. I'm definitely not saying the black shirts were wearing black multicam combat uniforms, with kits, weapons, and gear available that would definitely make them a private sector group. I'm not saying their uniforms were sterilized with all patches, logos, and markers stripped. I'm also not saying that the hazmat suits looked way beyond anything our MOPI system has. I'm not saying they brought several metal case in from their armored Vics, and I'm not saying they brought an advanced surveillance drone with them. I will say they weren't really hostile, if one even offered us a cigarette. The bird landed at the opposite side of the building, the open lot where they eventually told us to head. We prepared our guy for Kazovac on a litter with the Blackhawk and loaded up as the captain finished talking to some guy in a suit. He was much shorter, maybe 5'8". He bore the look of a younger but still weathered man. His hair was slicked back and had a hard part. A slight bump underneath his sports coat told me he was armed. The captain eventually joined us as soon as the aviation crew shut the door. He popped his helmet off, much to their anger, and slumped back in his seat. When we touched base and got back to the COP, our sister team, Artemis replaced us on QRF. I've been thinking about that shit for days now, about what those people did to them in that lab, what the captain said. They kidnapped them, cut them up, changed them, all for what? Some sick fantasy. Who they even owned that lab? There were no United States markings, no logos, zip. Like I said before, there's still a lot I don't know, but what I do know is that those men got exactly what they deserved. That thing crying out for help, pleading for us to make its suffering end. The more I think about it, the more it makes me sick. I don't know who those guys were that relieved us. They didn't have any markings. Some of them were speaking German, if my memory serves. But whoever they are, I hope they learn from their mistakes and never tamper with that evil shit again. I had a really weird experience about 3 months ago while driving home. I had to move my mom from Minneapolis to Madison, Wisconsin. And I was driving home on one of my trips, moving her stuff alone. It was about 1 a.m. and I was in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't in a town or anything, and I was really tired because I had been driving all day, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I distinctly saw a person running out of the woods straight towards the side of my car. I was going about 65, and I thought, okay, I've been driving too long, and now I'm seeing things. All of a sudden, smacks into the side of my car. I was terrified. It was pitch black out there. There was no traffic. There's nobody around, and there's nothing near me. I was just in the middle of nowhere. This came out of the woods. It ran into the side of my car. My car was dented. It hit me so hard. Out of the corner of my eye. I was really tired, so I don't know what it was I saw, but I could have sworn it was on 2 legs, and it was probably about 6 feet tall or taller. In the corner of my eye, what I thought I saw was a man wearing a gray sweatshirt and a hood. Art asked if she stopped her car. I was too scared. I was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't understand why someone would come out of the woods and run straight into my car when there's no traffic or anything. If they needed to cross the street, why would they wait until there was car coming? So I thought I should call the police. Then I thought, what did I just see? What was that? What do I say to the police that somebody darted out of the woods and ran into my car? So I drove home. I was probably about 30 or 40 minutes away, and I was shaking. I was scared. I don't know what had just happened to me. I got out to see if there was damage to my car. I thought about calling the police, and I decided it had to be an animal because there was nothing around there. So the next day I looked in the papers and I looked through everything to see if there were any dead bodies in the road, because that would have made the news, and there wasn't nothing. So I don't know if it was an animal or what it was. Another thing that was terrifying was that it was running very fast. Very fast. That's why I thought it couldn't have been a person. I knew not to stop. I was going about 65. No blood. No hair. I checked for blood because I thought maybe I hit somebody. No blood, but you can see the dent. It's on the driver's side of the car. That's where it smacked into me. You can definitely see the dent, but it wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. You can see it, but it wasn't like serious damage to the car or anything. This happened 7 months ago, and since I haven't received any answers from anyone, I'll share it here and see what others think. I just returned from my walk around 7 p.m. The sun was setting, and with an overcast sky, it was a bit darker than usual. For a little background, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, one of those houses situated away from the main city right by a mountain preserve. It's essentially connected to it, creating a very cool but unsettling area, especially at night, which is where I go on my walks. About 15 minutes away from my house, right in front of me, I encountered this strange-looking creature about 10 feet away. It seemed to be floating, completely motionless, making it hard to discern its exact appearance. Below is a link to a drawing I made to depict what it looked like, with glowing red eyes. One snapped horn, another full horn on its head, long black demonic arms with sharp-looking claws, and wearing a dark, tattered cloak. I stared at it for about 2 whole seconds before it vanished, almost like fog. Then it appeared again further down my walk, about 5 or 6 minutes later, even farther than before, almost as if it was watching me from a distance. I was listening to my playlist at the time, and suddenly a loud, horrible, high-pitched, blood-curdling scream blasted through my headphones in the middle of the song, and the creature vanished. It was the loudest scream I've ever heard, probably intensified because it was directly into my ears, but still it made me drop to my knees. After that, it seemed to vanish. I didn't see it again. But the rest of the way home, I could feel a presence as well as a sense of being watched. I've had encounters with other creatures out here, but this one was probably one of the most terrifying I've experienced. I have shared this before, but people seem to get a kick out of it. Not much of a horror story, but my most interesting Craigslist sale. Was selling a 70s Buick for $1,500. I had a few calls, but no one super interested. Then I had a kid, maybe 20, one call, and he really wanted the car. I told him $1,500, but I was willing to talk about it. He said, okay, I'll see you at 7 p.m. at this parking lot. I get there at 6:50 and he never shows. 7:30. I call but no answer and I go home. At 9:45 that night, he calls me actually apologizing for not showing and asks if I can meet there now. Sure, I just want to get rid of this car leaking oil in my driveway. I get there at 10 and he still isn't there. I get ready to leave at 10:15 and he rolls up in a Caprice Classic with giant rims on it. The driver gets out. Two really skanky-looking girls get out of the back, and the kid buying the car gets out of the front. He opens the car, pops the hood, starts it, checks it all out. He takes it on a quick drive while I am standing with the two skanky girls and the driver. He comes back, hops out of the car, and waves me to the car. Kid, I really want this man. This is awesome. Me, okay. Well, I would like $1,500, but what are you wanting to pay? Kid, I was only able to scrape together $1,300, but I've got a good deal for you. Give it to me for $1,250, and you can have her pointing to the skanky brunette, or let's do this for $1,000, and you can have them both. Me, I turn and look at the girls. My guess is they are 16. And look like they'd do it right here in the parking lot. Yeah, I'll just take the $1,300 and you can get the car. Kid, what? You don't think they'd be good? If, man, that pussy is tight enough to rip your dick off. $1,250 and you can have the blonde. Me, no, thanks though. They do look like they'd be a goof, but I'll have to pass. Kid, all right, man, you don't know what you're missing. I'll give you a 2-day window if you want either of them. Just give me a call. You can refund $50 or $300, and we can work it out. Me, enjoy the car, and thanks for the 2 days. He actually gave me $1,300 in cash and $155 of it was in ones. But I did not call him back to get the girls. My wife would have probably frowned on that. Right, so I've got a story. I've lived in Florida most of my life until October 2020 when I moved to upstate South Carolina. Lived with my grandparents in the mountains around Salem for a little while before moving to an outer suburb of Greenville. The backyard of my house in Greenville had a downward slope and a creek at the bottom, then an upward slope on the other side leading to another set of houses. The creek led into a large patch of woods, one more house down past mine, a good 50-ish acres. Not long after moving in, I went and explored the creek and found a small shard of pottery half buried in the ground. It was dark greenish and had a few basic floral designs on it. I brought it inside because I was planning to contact the nearby university to ask if it had any significance, but I never actually got around to doing it. One day shortly after that, sitting on my back porch around noon, I start hearing whistles like some guy was calling his dog or something. But it was the exact same tone and melody every single time. It never changed. I looked around and didn't see anyone, but I could pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was coming from the patch of woods down the creek the first couple times I heard it, then slowly moved out of the woods and into the backyard of the house behind mine. Again, I didn't see anyone, and it was still the same whistle, almost like it was a recording on repeat. This happened every couple days for a few weeks. Always the same exact whistle, and no one else to be seen but me. I didn't think anything of it at the time until I moved again late last year to Spartanburg County. Obviously, I won't say exactly where I am, but I'm in the northern part in a very rural area. Plenty of woods around, along with plenty of coyotes and other wildlife. I hadn't heard the whistle in a long while, probably about a year. A couple weeks ago, I was sitting outside my house about 9 p.m. doing a bonfire. I heard a pack of coyotes go nuts around a quarter-mile away, which isn't unusual, so I didn't think anything of it. After a couple minutes, they went completely silent, and I didn't hear any other wildlife, not even crickets. Then out of nowhere, I hear the same exact whistle again. It was coming from a ditch next to the road in front of my house, about 30 yards from where I was sitting. I froze and sat there listening, as I knew that this time something was up. Why am I hearing the same exact whistle as I've heard in the backyard of a previous house over an hour's drive away? I waited another few minutes and heard it one more time, then silence. Another few minutes passed. Then the usual wildlife and crickets started going again. The rest of the night I felt watched, and now every time I go out at night, I feel the same way. I don't know if it's a walker for sure, considering all I've got are a few identical whistles, but it's definitely not normal. Whatever it might be, there's no doubt it followed me from Greenville over an hour away. I tried ruling it out by saying it's birds, but the timing is just way too irregular. Surely I'd hear it more often, right? Instead of a few times last summer and then not at all until the middle of September a year later. Looking for answers on what it might be and what to do about it, if anything. As far as the pottery shard, it was left in a closet at the previous house in Greenville, which has now been rented out to another tenant. Any other questions, feel free to ask. My encounter story dates back to when I was interning in 2009, 2010 for the New Jersey Park Forestry Service. I had just graduated from college and was assigned to work in national parks close to home for a short period. My job involved conducting trail maintenance and similar tasks in various state parks throughout South Jersey. One Saturday night, after finishing my work and heading back to the office, my supervisor called me on the radio. As I sat there waiting for his response, I heard rustling to my right. Initially, I thought it might be someone else or another animal, but the noise grew louder and seemed to be coming in my direction, capturing my attention. I began to speculate, considering the darkness. Perhaps it was a deer. Standing still, I observed as a large shadow figure emerged from the tree line. What I saw terrified me, to the best of my recollection. It appeared to be a large humanoid, covered in hair resembling a gorilla. It stood upright, but to my shock, it had wings on its back and a lizard-like tail. Standing approximately 7 feet tall, it was covered in thick hair from head to toe. After about 10 seconds of watching it, frozen in place, I lost my composure. I started screaming at the top of my lungs, running back down the trail for the entire 2 miles. Upon reaching headquarters, my supervisor asked what had happened. I recounted everything, but he advised me not to tell anybody, fearing they would think I was crazy or might remove me from the job. For almost 4 years, I kept my experience to myself. However, I now feel that enough time has passed to share my story. When I finally spoke up, my boss could sense the fear in my voice. Several other rangers stepped forward, confirming they had also heard screams long before my sighting. They believed that the creature I saw was the source of the mysterious noises. Although I never heard the screams, the other rangers were spooked as well, even though they were reluctant to speak openly about it. My best friend and I once illegally climbed a mountain in northwestern Oregon with our dogs. We started off parked in a no trespassing zone on an abandoned logging road, and we hiked along a long overgrown trail that we were absolutely not supposed to be on. I'm gonna go ahead and blame it on us being young and dumb, but yeah, I know it was a bad plan. Nobody knew where we were, and it would have taken quite the rescue mission to even locate our car. We made it to the summit. We spent some time messing around and eating lunch up there, and we decided to head back down. But we needed more water. We drank more than we thought we would. Again, young and dumb. We heard the sound of running water about an hour into our trek down, or we had to hack through a bunch of devil's club or stinging nettles to even get close enough to filter it. We, or our dogs, were getting scraped to shit. Or we chopped our way into a random clearing with a pile of animal skulls or bones just sitting right in the middle of it. The clearing was probably 12 feet around, or the pile was at least 4 feet tall. There was a main stalk of devil's club, maybe 5 to 6 feet tall or 3 or 4 inches around, stuck firmly into the earth in the center, or then the bones were stacked around it almost vertically, caught on the thorns with a raccoon's skull sitting precariously on the top. I'm surprised I wasn't dumb enough to grab one of those bones or end up with a cursed souvenir, but we were spooked. There were also ripped up shreds of fabric stuck or tied onto the trees surrounding the clearing, like the kind that comes from a windbreaker. Nylon, maybe? I don't find bones themselves inherently creepy by any means, but an intentional outdoor collection that seemed to be maintained or deliberately placed. No thanks. No idea to this day what that was or who put it there, but we talked about it all the way back. I can't stress enough how abandoned this trail was. We had to cut trees off the road just to get to the head of it, or we didn't see another car or human that entire day, but it didn't look like something that could have been there for years. A single winter storm would have knocked it down. The way they were stacked so precisely or vertically still gives me chills just thinking about it. I was working early one morning on a Wednesday. At that time, I'd been a police officer for a little over 10 years. I was in a good mood that morning because I was expecting some potentially good news about an upcoming promotion. In fact, everyone was in a good mood that morning. I was eager to do my job and go home to my family. My day changed dramatically when the phone rang, though. It was an old friend of mine, and she had called me directly. She sounded exhausted and a little incoherent. When I asked her what was going on, she explained that she hadn't been sleeping. We'll call her Megan for this story. Megan told me that she'd been waking up every night from sounds coming from the basement of her house. At first she assumed it was rats or skunks or something, but then she said the previous night the noises had gotten so loud that she was certain there was a person sleeping in her basement. Reports like that are never good to hear. It's a surprisingly common event where vagrants will break into someone's basement and live there for weeks on end, stealing from them and causing all kinds of damage. The real danger is if someone gains access to the main house. Megan lived alone at the time, so I immediately agreed to come over and take a look. I wanted to make sure that whatever was happening in her basement would come to an end. She asked me to come later as she was going to work. It sounds odd, but she wanted me to hear what she was hearing. She said that the sounds never happened in the daytime, so if I came over at night, then perhaps I could catch the person, if it even was a person that was living in her basement. I agreed, but it left me feeling uneasy and concerned all day. That evening she let me know when she was on her way home, and I went to meet her at her house. She offered to cook me dinner while we waited for the sounds to start back up. I was in an even better mood, as I had learned by that point that I'd gotten the promotion that I was after. So we had a little celebration. At around 10:30, I heard the first sound coming from downstairs. She stopped and told me to press my ear to the door, so I did. I could hear a fair amount of shuffling. It wasn't very clear what it was, but it was definitely too big to be a rat or a skunk. I told her that I was going to slowly open the door, but when I did, it made a loud sound and I could hear crashing in the basement. I ran down the stairs with my weapon drawn, but I stopped dead in my tracks when I switched the light on. What I found was what looked like a large nest of some kind. There were branches and feathers and dried leaves all piled together in the center of the room, and it stank like nothing I'd ever smelled before. The window was broken, so whoever it was had left. I told her to stay at my house for a few nights and then arranged for some trail cams to be put up in the basement so that we could catch whoever was down there and have sufficient evidence. After a few days, I went to retrieve the trail cams and watch the footage. Megan was sitting next to me at the time. What I saw completely blew my mind. A large animal with long, thin arms and legs climbed in through the window. It behaved similar to a large ape, only I'd never seen an ape like that before. It brought with it more items to add to the nest. I know for a fact that apes don't make nests. In fact, most animals of that size don't make nests. It walked on its two hind legs like a human, but was hunched over the entire time. It had a large rib cage and large ape-like hands, but I remember noting that it had no ears and seemed to have no color on its skin, apart from one large black spot on the back of its head. Megan was freaking out and asking me what to do. I had no answer, for I'd never encountered anything like that before. So I gave the footage to my superior. When he watched it, his eyes stretched wide. The next thing I knew, I had a non-disclosure agreement on my desk, and the footage was confiscated from my possession. Megan was also forced to sign so that she couldn't speak of it. She said that men with suits had come into her basement, and when they were done, there was nothing left, and her entire basement had been boarded up. She never really felt safe in her home, though, and wound up selling it a few months later. It was a sad day, as that home had been in her family for generations. But whatever security she once felt there had been stripped away by whatever creature had decided to nest there. I was a ranger in St. Louis County, Minnesota. The year was 2007. A man in our staff went missing during his lunch break. He was a husband and father. We sent a search party out to locate him. We searched the area for about a day or so, but he was nowhere to be found. We even made inquiries to other nearby towns, but they had no information. We assumed he had wandered away from the area and may have perished. The family of this man requested his remains be found and buried. We honored this request. We had several months go by, and we put this man behind us. Then a strange occurrence happened one early evening in the fall. I was out on patrol, running radar on the roads. I was about 2 miles north of town, which is a rural area. I was doing my rounds, and I spotted a pair of eyes in the ditch. I thought it was a fox or something. I stopped my vehicle, stepped out. I wasn't expecting what I saw next. A dark, shadowy figure became now visible. It was hunched over, finishing off a deer. This deer was a simple 4-point buck. The thing had just been killed and was eating it. That's not all. I was shocked at what followed. It stood back up, this thing on 2 legs, walking upright. It looked me in the eyes and quickly disappeared. The eyes were blood red. I watched this thing walk off into a nearby creek and disappeared immediately. I went back to the office and called my boss and told him when I saw him. He told me to stay there until he could get there. So I sat there staying in the office while my boss and another ranger wrote down everything they could about what I had to say. They searched for a few hours but could not find anything. I was scared to go out on patrol the next few days. It only happened 1 or 2 more times after this, and even then, that's probably too much. I ended up seeing it again in the area where I first saw it. It never acted aggressive, but it was always in that area. The final time it was winter, and there was about 12 inches of snow on the ground. I saw it again. This was the last time. I was relieved when the spring came, and I did not have to patrol that section any longer. Now, before I end my story, let me quickly tell you why I included the first part about the man missing after lunch. I believe that his spirit became disembodied and turned into this horrible, ghastly apparition that I saw, or otherwise known as a Windigo. I believe that it's possible that his spirit, or him dying, turned into this creature that I saw. Of course, this is just a wild theory, but I cling to it because it makes sense to me. I would love to hear any comments or thoughts or even theories on what they think. Do you believe that he turned into a Windigo? Is it possible that he died and his spirit was able to manifest as this being? I don't know. I worked as a police officer in the town of Nacogdoches for around 8 years. I loved it there. A lot of people don't see why I enjoyed it so much, but that town had really brought me peace after many rough years. That peace was completely disrupted one day, though. There are many trails in Nacogdoches. Most of them are completely tucked away in thick trees and brush. It was my day off, and walking those trails was one of my favorite things to do. At the time I had been divorced. I'm ashamed to admit that I wasn't a very good father in those years. I hadn't seen my children in years, and I had made very little effort to be part of their lives. It's a terrible thing to admit to, and I have many regrets, but that's the kind of man I was at the time. I had picked out my trail for the day. It was one that I hadn't walked yet, and I decided I'd go exploring. For some reason that day my children were on my mind. I remember that it bothered me because it made me feel guilty. It was kind of a bummer to feel that guilt on my day off. In hindsight, I was probably thinking about them because some part of me knew that I was in imminent danger. The first thing I noticed was that the trail was very quiet, seemed unusual. Normally, I'd come across at least one other person while on my walks. That day, I hadn't seen a single other soul. It didn't bother me too much, but it did tell me that I needed to be more vigilant for snakes and other dangerous creatures. I had stopped for a drink of water, and I was leaning against the wooden rail that lined the trail, when all of a sudden the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I hate that feeling so much. I don't really know why it happens to us, but it's never a good sign. I lowered my water bottle and listened carefully for any kinds of sound. I couldn't hear anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Suddenly the space around me felt way too quiet. I looked toward the direction I was going as I contemplated whether or not I should carry on with the trail or head back towards my car. I made the logical decision to head back towards my car. It wasn't far along the trail, so I knew it wouldn't take long to get to safety. As I walked, the only sound I could hear was the sound of my own footsteps, and it completely unsettled me. Then, something stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a light thudding sound, and it was coming from high up in the trees. I stopped to look. I scanned the trees, but heard and saw nothing. I decided to stay where I was for just a moment and listen. Then I heard the thought again, just to my left. It was as if something had landed in the tree. I looked up at the tree, which was covered in red and orange leaves. I focused hard on the leaves, searching for a large bird, or maybe a squirrel. Then slow movement caught my eye. Something massive was stalking me. I couldn't see it clearly, but it had long limbs, and it climbed through the branches sideways. It seemed to be keeping me in its sights as it moved gently through the leaves, barely rustling the branches. Then I saw part of its face. 2 saucer-like eyes stared at me from between the branches. It seemed like minutes that we stared at each other. Not once did the creature blink. It seemed to be patiently waiting for me to look away. I was frozen with fear. I could hear nothing but the sound of my heart beating in my chest. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, more hikers stumbled upon me. They were noisier than I was. They had a Bluetooth speaker that was pumping loud hip-hop music, and they were laughing and joking. It scared the creature away. It took off along the trees, moving faster than any animal I'd seen before. Those other hikers will never know that their obnoxious behavior had saved my life that day. All I remember thinking was that I was going to die without ever seeing my children grow up. As soon as I got back to my car, I phoned my kids. That experience changed my life for the better. Still, I never want to be that scared again. It was a typical morning in Yellowstone National Park when the body of park ranger John was found. He had been on patrol the night before, but never returned to his post. The other rangers searched for him and eventually found him in a remote area of the park. But something was off. John's skull was missing, and his body had been brutally attacked. My name is Jack, and I'm one of the park rangers. I was tasked with analyzing the body and trying to figure out what could have caused such a gruesome death. As I examined the wounds, I couldn't help but think that they looked like they had been made by a large, sharp claw. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the work of a creature similar to Bigfoot. I shared my findings with the rest of the park rangers, but they mocked me and said I was just seeing things. They reported the case as a murder to the police, but they said they were too busy to investigate. I was left alone with the body, and I knew I had to find out the truth. I decided to take matters into my own hands and ventured into the woods. I wanted to see if I could find any clues or evidence that would support my theory. As I walked deeper into the forest, I heard a loud roar in the distance. I froze in place, unsure of what to do. But then I saw it. A creature, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was covered in fur, had a large, sharp claw, and stood at least 8 feet tall. The creature roared again, and a buck ran past me, panicked. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a nightmare. The creature then fled into the woods, and I was left standing there, in shock. I knew I had to tell the others what I had seen, but I didn't know if they would believe me. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I eventually made it back to the ranger station, and I told them everything. But they still didn't believe me. They thought I was just seeing things, or that I was losing my mind. I was left feeling alone and isolated. I knew there was a creature out there that had killed John, and I was the only one who knew about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there watching me. I knew I had to be careful, and I couldn't let my guard down. I was determined to find the truth and bring justice for John, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that followed me, knowing that I was the only one who knew the true horror that lurked in the woods of Yellowstone National Park. I'm a Coast Guard, old Navy tug brought into service to the USGS Creeker. Had a ghost of a Navy guy who died in the bilge from gas. Fast forward to a new used mechanic trying to fix one of the batteries and wasn't getting it quite right. A guy on the batter next to him said, "No, you do it like this," and unscrewed a part, showing him how it was done. However, the other guy was in a Navy uniform and we were at sea. He diapered shortly after talking. Lots of us had seen that Navy engineer in the past, but that particular coastie got off the boat at the next port call and refused to reboard. We left without him, not sure whatever happened, but he never came back to the ship. We also had the screams of a lady that would happen during late shifts, enough that we always turned the boats aft away from the direction of the screams in case it was a civilian in the water. No woman aboard this ship. We would light up that section of ocean with high-powered lighting, but there was never anything there. We were told not to log the events. One time we paddled into a backcountry site that we like camping at in the fall. It's high on a rocky cliff, but has natural stairs up, so it's nicely protected from the wind and damp of the lake. One day we were walking around in the woods behind the site just to see what we see. There are lots of open spaces caused by exposed rock that create a natural trail. We weren't even that far from the site. All of a sudden we hear a short, low growl. We freeze. Neither of us were sure we actually heard it. We wait a minute, see and hear nothing, so we start walking again. A longer growl. Now the hair is standing up on the back of my neck. My instinct is to run, but I don't want to activate some animal's prey drive. We still don't see anything. My husband picks up a big stick and starts hitting trees and making lots of noise so we seem big. We slowly back away and walk calmly back to our campsite. Needless to say, we didn't sleep much that night. We never saw what it was, but our theory is that it was a coyote. We often hear them howling and yipping near there, and I've read they sleep in the open during the day. We pull into a state park campground to camp for a couple of nights. There was a line of trees separating our campsite from our neighbors, and our neighbors had a strap strung up between two of the trees with 2 blackened sausages hanging from hooks. Trying to ignore how weird that is, our neighbors greet us and say, "Don't worry about the sausages. Our buddy got a trail camera, so we're trying to catch raccoons with it," glossing over the fact that this trail cam was pointed right into our campsite. I had definitely had to keep this in mind when I got out of my camper to pee in the middle of the night. The sausages were still there the next morning, but I think eventually a ranger came by and told them to cut it out because they disappeared sometime during the day. I didn't like the weird vibes emanating from that spot, so we just ignored their presence for the most part. They were gone for most of the day, but came back to their enormous RV and generator right as we were thinking it would be peacefully quiet for the rest of the evening. The last morning, I wake up to the sound of 1,000 crows circling us. I lay there for a while and then peek out and see a dead crow lying right in the same precise spot below where those black sausages had been hanging the day before. Every crow within a 100-mile radius was circling overhead, angrily cawing out during this crow funeral. Now, I've been on the wrong side of a crow war before, so I wasn't too interested in any of them recognizing me. We packed up our camp as quickly as we could and hit the road. It took moving 1,000 miles away to finally feel comfortable enough to tell you this story. This happened just before my senior year of high school over a period of 3 weeks in the summer. I was 17 years old, drug-free and sober. At the most, I took Advil for headaches every now and again. I just want to assure you I was not on any mind-altering substances or long-term medication that could affect my cognitive ability. During the summer, my curfew was 11 p.m., and this occurred while driving home from my, at that time, boyfriend's house, which took roughly 15 minutes. So let's say about 10:45 at night. I was full of energy at this age and a night owl, so I was not even remotely tired. In fact, I was hyped up with a warm summer nighttime breeze, car windows down, singing along to the radio. I took a shortcut through back roads to avoid going into the tiny city with its jerk cops. Also, one of the roads I took was super straight and flat, so I could really speed. And that feels great when you're a teenager. But right before that road, I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First, I'd take a right turn that was more than 90 degrees almost back the way I head came. Then, in exactly half a mile, I would turn left onto the long, straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much because the small stretch of road was more like packed gravel than it would be a waste, as I would have to slow down again to turn left onto the much better road where I could let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where all this went down. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with an detached garage, and it seemed odd how quickly it had been erected as we built our family house, and it took us a year to finish it. I will start at the beginning because I believe this is all related. Week 1. I am positively jamming to my music. The wind whipping through my car feels great, and I'm relaxed in my very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just bopping along, when my lights illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of the road. It's a wolf, a real wolf, a solid white, real wolf. I know the difference in my dog breeds and a wolf. I love watching dog competitions, wildlife documentaries, and have even met a 1/4 wolf in person. They look different from domestic dogs. This was a wolf, and it was amazing and blowing my mind. I slow down even more while I turn down my music. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It is sitting perfectly still on the corner of the road, staring at the house, almost unblinking. Its ears didn't even flick towards me. All its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like that, even less for there to be a white wolf in rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop behind it, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Indian stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I couldn't stay, though. Mom would never believe me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh, I said goodbye to the wolf and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special, and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week 2. I was driving home again, and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfy buddy, hoping to see him again around that area, so I drove extra slow with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized what the presence of a guardian meant. It meant danger. Alas, I was on the short road approaching the new little house. Then I saw the thing that to this very day makes me question my sanity. My reality and possibility of eldrich terrors, as Lovecraft described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs folded and pulled in tight with its hunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the box. It was mottled green and black with undertones of blue, and it looked wet and slimy all over. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of razor-sharp teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones, ropey muscles to hold it upright, and at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terrible long fingers. While its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with back-facing knees for sprinting and tipped-in raptor-like curved claws. It looked tall, maybe 7 foot, maybe more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for prey. Then there were its eyes, solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized, it's going to look at me, it's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panic, terror unique to this alien thing swallowed me instantly, feeling like I was tilting off the world I had always known and into an abyss where monsters like this exist. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up, or I'd be ripped by those teeth and torn with those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had a manual crank window. F me, I had a crank window because I was scared of crashing into water and not being able to get out of my car, but now I realize that there were far worse things in the world than crashing into water. Its head was turning towards me, and I had let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first, and I was cranking it as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed, and then I put my gas pedal to the floor. Gravel road be damned. I thought I must not look at it as I passed. I must not look at it or make direct eye contact. I just shouldn't. It's not good to connect with these things. I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision, I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, and it sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed. I'm really screwed. I'm really screwed. I was mumbling through my tears as I slid around the turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down the road. I felt sick. My heart was hammering. I had snot and tears rolling down my face, and my hands were shaking. I glanced in my rearview mirror and could only see darkness as there were no street lamps out there. I used a trick I've mentioned in one of my other stories to tap my brake soft enough the light comes on, but I don't actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was building up in my wake, but amidst the swirling chaos I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted roads and not let off the gas again the rest of the way. No more looking back. I was going to drive 100 nanimp, which is as fast as I can go, before my governor kicks in. I even ran a stop sign at the end of the road because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have even been relieved to get pulled over, but I did not. When I got home, no one was awake. I was pretty trusted to come home on time, so I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a long time before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him. Then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There's many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed. Week 3. I refused to take my shortcut anymore. For that reason, I would have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit early, and he'd been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to a park to walk around, and on the way back, he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw that thing. I was hysterical, begging him not to drive there, but he would not be dissuaded, so as we got closer and I could not stop him, I leaned my passenger side seat all the way back and pulled myself down, cowering in panic of getting near the place. I hid below the window and covered my eyes while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point he stopped the car. "Spooky, you have to see this," he said. "No," I whined, resisting him, pulling at my arm. "No, you really have to see this. Look," he said in a changed tone of astonishment. Tears in my eyes, I uncurled and slowly peeked over the rim of the window. The house was gone, burnt clear down to the foundation, with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted to get out of here, while I grabbed for his arm, but he easily avoided me and got out. He walked around the ashy piles of the ruins for a bit, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thinking on his face. There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. It doesn't seem like other burnt-out houses. Something's weird. When we got to his house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area. There weren't any. He called the closest fire station and was quickly brushed off by the person that answered, as they didn't know about a fire there and didn't have time to find out before quickly hanging up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still makes my chest tighten, my skin crawl, and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble because I know I saw it, a thing that is nothing like any creature known to humans, yet still I saw it. If you've heard of something that matches its description, let me know. So when I was in high school, my friends and I were into really spooky shit that we had no business messing around with. We would visit cemeteries at night, go to our small town's local haunt spot, to try to stir up any urban legends. But the story I'm about to tell made us quit cold turkey trying to seek out the paranormal. One night, we were over at our friend's century-old home. I mean, it was old and creaky and the perfect setting for a night of Ouija. We brought it out, and for the first half hour, nothing insane happened. Just some movement from the planchette. Then, feeling smug, I asked the spirits what my middle name was. The thing is, my middle name is literally made up by my parents. It's not a real name. No one in the circle knew, let alone could spell my middle name. There was literally no way someone could even guess it. But the board knew. It spelled my middle name perfectly, and I could feel my heart fall into my gut. Keep in mind, my hands were not on the planchette, so I couldn't have moved it myself. Everyone laughed, because what a silly middle name that would be. But I had to confess that it was mine, and the color drained from everyone's face. All of a sudden, a glass ashtray that was sitting a few feet away on the coffee table split clean in two, and we were done. We left the house to go stay somewhere else. I walk outside. It's the kind of dark when it's too early for morning still, but too late for night, and it's freakishly quiet outside. I thought nothing of it at the time. Our trash cans were located on the side of the house in the backyard, halfway to the gate. If you stood at the side of my house looking towards the gate, you would see a hedge to the left of the gate that goes up to your waist. Across the street is another house with a driveway light installed. The light gives off that blaring white security light. Anyway, I get to the trash can to throw away the junk. When I look over towards the gate, That's when I saw it, whatever it was. I could only see the outline of it because the blaring white security light was in my eyes, but it was the most smooth and round head I've seen, which connected to very slouched shoulders. At first I didn't know what I was looking at, just an odd shape, the same height of the hedges. It wasn't until it moved silently and slowly towards the bottom of the hedge and to the neighbor's yard that I saw it looked headish. I was 14 at the time and just stood there waiting for more movement or sound. After about 1 minute, I waited, of not hearing anything, I sprint back towards the kitchen door. I don't know what it was or why it moved so silently, but it wasn't much longer before we moved out of that house due to strange things. But that's a story for another time, or at least another post. So to start off, I grew up on a small farm surrounded by forest. It's a small town below a major city in Appalachia. The first incident with this entity was probably when I was maybe 8-10, so 10-13 years ago. I was in my bedroom at home listening to music and playing. My window was open and it was evening, getting dark, but I could still see outside. I noticed my dad walking by the window, stone-faced. I was going to say hello to him, but decided not to. Later, I mentioned to my mom that I saw Dad pass my window. She informs me that my dad wasn't home. And anyway, my window was too high up for my dad to have been at that height. Mom decides it was probably a bear. We had a lot of hunting dogs that very often would freak out over nothing, but at the time of seeing what I thought was my dad, they weren't upset. I've mentioned this to my significant other before, and my friends and I were talking about our strangest moments, and significant other tells me to tell them that story, but then tells me he saw something similar when we were visiting my dad in his peripherals. He said it looked like a very tall person, but didn't see specific details, but that it walked past the large kitchen window. He meant to tell me earlier, but honestly forgot. It's really weird, and I'm not sure what else to think about it, but since my significant other told me he saw it too, I've been trying to research what it might be. I've also just felt creeped out at the thought of going to my dad's again. I've had other weird experiences that I'm not sure what to think of, such as going hiking and finding small shacks in the middle of the woods that are my dad's property, then not finding them again. And my mother calling me from outside while I was playing and telling me she heard screaming, thinking it was me and couldn't see me in the yard and thought a wild animal could have grabbed me. Not sure if they're related, but figured I'd add that. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you tomorrow, son.